Joining us now, MS Now reporter David Noriega from Minneapolis, MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard, and MS Now senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin. So I'm going to start with you, David. The administration's talking about lowering tensions, talking about a drawdown. Are you seeing that drawdown in the city?
It's too early to tell, Katie, essentially. I'm in touch with a number of people who participate in rapid response ICE Watch type activities, and they've told me that they have seen a little bit of a lull in ICE and Border Patrol activity in certain parts of the city, but that has happened before for 3 or 4 days at a time, and then activity picks right back up. And that doesn't mean that activity has gone away. There have been multiple reports of both ICE and Border Patrol, picking people up around the Twin Cities area. You were right to point out at the top of the show, Katie, that we've heard from Kristi Noem, Tom Homan, others in the administration from the beginning that they are supposed to be targeting violent criminals and taking the worst of the worst, in their words, off of American streets. But of course, what we've been reporting from the beginning is that since these mass immigration arrests started last year in LA and then moved on to other American cities, it's been very much the opposite of that. They've been going after people that they can find in public places based on what they look like, what they sound like, the work that they do. That's what's been happening in this city. That's what's been happening in other cities. I spoke last night to a young woman whose father was one of those people. He was picked up in a gas station after he works in construction. He went to pick up some materials. He'd actually limited going out of his house as much as possible. He was no longer going out to restaurants or doing anything else that was sort of, for fun. He was only going out when he needed to for work, and that's what he was doing in this instance, but he was picked up when he stopped at a gas station. And crucially, Katie, his family hasn't been able to find him since then. He's not in the ICE detainee locator system. He was able to call them once from Texas, but wasn't able to tell them where exactly he was. He's essentially gone missing. As we've talked about before, this is something that happens, that has started happening pretty frequently in this new immigration enforcement regime. I want to play you a little bit of what that young woman told me about how this incident is affecting her and her family. Take a listen.
You look him up, all that you find is the same answer, 0 results. So he's nowhere to be found in the system. So our family's been devastated. It feels like that heart that you once were as a family is shattered into little pieces. And I don't say one piece is missing, I say all of it. It feels like it shatters and breaks, because when your family is united and when the love between the family members is strong, it really does feel like your family can't be what it once was.
Katie, last April, early in the Trump administration, Todd Lyons, the director of ICE, said that he wanted his agency to operate like Amazon in terms of the scale and speed with which they move human beings from one place to another. And that is what the agency has been trying to do since these mass arrests started last year. The detention system is completely overwhelmed. There are record numbers of people in detention. It is increasingly difficult for people to track down their loved ones. What this means, according to immigrant families and lawyers that I speak to frequently, is that there are very regular due process violations. When people get detained for deportation, they have due process rights. They can contest their deportation. Being unable to reach lawyers and family members makes that increasingly difficult, Katie.
All right. Vaughn, let's talk about the White House here, because there are some competing threads. One of them is the White House clearly is trying to turn the page on what has been happening in Minneapolis. Whether that's going to be effective is not yet clear. But sending Tom Homan out, and I know this is relative, but sending Tom Homan out to try to make it look like there's some heart there, there's some humanity there. He gets emotional in front of reporters. Instead of having Greg Bovino there, who we also showed at the top of the show, who's talking about turning and burning and cheering on law enforcement operations even still. What are they trying to do here? And if the public is upset about it, which they are, is Donald Trump facing a different sort of pressure from maybe MAGA world and his base that could change the administration's next step?
I think the difficult part, if you want to give anybody in this administration any slack, is that they work for a president who does not express regret or apology. And what you have is a deputy chief of staff and a secretary of the Department of Homeland Security who both went to call Alex Preddy effectively a domestic terrorist, and members of the administration have effectively tried to sidestep that question altogether on whether they would walk that back. And what you saw was, over the course of now the last month in Minneapolis, was a consistent doubling down of the tactics and the operations that were used on the ground. It was 2 weeks ago, after the killing of Renee Good, that I asked Secretary Noem whether she was comfortable with having Fourth Amendment rights of individuals living in Minneapolis violated for violations of asking them for their papers without reasonable suspicion. And her response to me at the time was, every single action that our ICE officers take is according to the law and following protocols that we have used for years. They are doing everything correctly. Fast forward, the fact that Tom Homan here today acknowledged that there were actions that did not amount to being perfect steps being taken by federal agents on the ground, I think is notable, because we don't often hear that from the Trump administration. Very specifically, Tom Homan said, I'm not here because the federal government has carried its mission out perfectly. I do not want to hear that everything that has been done here has been perfect. And I think that that is really, as you look forward to, as you and David were talking about, what steps are being taken moving forward, I think it's going to take a lot of reflecting, especially when the face of the President of the United States, just in the last 2 hours, posting new video of Alex Preddy 11 days before he was shot and killed, having a scuffle with apparent federal agents. I want to let you take a listen or a look at this video here, and we can talk about it on the other side. Again, this is video, Katie, of Alex Preddy 11 days before an interaction with federal agents. An attorney for the Preddy family said that a week before Alex was gunned down in the street, despite posing no threat to anyone, he was violently assaulted by a group of ICE agents. Nothing has happened. Nothing that happened a full week before could possibly have justified Alex's killing at the hands of ICE on January 24th. But you're looking at a president of the United States that over the course of the last 12 hours has repeatedly posted that very video here at a time in which his administration has largely been defiant of its operations and its tactical procedures on the ground.
Really well put, Vaughn. Thank you. Okay, Lisa, let's talk about the courts. It's striking to hear the chief federal judge in Minnesota say that ICE has been defying 100 different court orders and that ICE is behaving as if ICE itself is the law.
It's crazy to me to have that said by the chief judge of the District of Minnesota, particularly given his background. You know, we have said this many times, but when it comes to the lawlessness of this administration, the folks who are calling that out are not all appointees of Democratic presidents. Many of them have conservative legal movement bona fides. That is absolutely true of this particular judge, Patrick Schiltz. And the order in which he related that, Katie, is not one where he had to say any of that. The question was just, is Todd Lyons going to come to his courtroom on Friday and testify or not? And he said, it's no longer necessary. You have told me that you released the person in question. He was supposed to come and explain why the person hadn't been released. And they said, he's been released. We agree. The hearing is off. But then he took the opportunity to say, I have spoken with the other judges in my district. We have counted between us nearly 100 instances in which ICE has not followed our orders.
So what's the recourse and what's still open?
Well, I think a lot of the things that are still open are civil applications. So, for example, the state of Minnesota and the Twin Cities have a pending motion for a temporary restraining order against the continued operation of Metro Surge. They're also asking, if it continues, to have this Judge Kate Menendez rein in some of the tactics that are being used on the ground against people who aren't subject to enforcement, immigration-related arrests. But some of the other things that are open go back to something that David was saying. When we're thinking about the immigrants who are being detained, who are the cause of the protests on the ground, many of them have brought cases recently saying, Your right to detain me is in question. You didn't have a warrant, judicial or administrative. Or I have status in this country. I never should have been picked up in the first place. And that's where our colleague Fallon Gallagher and I did a review of 61 cases that were decided between January 20th, January 27th, where immigrants were challenging their detention. We found that in all but one case, with judges appointed by both Democrats and Republicans, the immigrants won every single time but one. And in that one outstanding case, the person had a criminal history. But in all of the rest, not only did they have no criminal history, they were arrested in circumstances that turn your stomach. A Kenyan woman outside a CVS looking for her seizure medication, about to walk in and get it. Somebody who was a deferred action for childhood arrivals, a dreamer, who had lawful status to be here. Other people who entered as refugees or had pending claims for asylum, had never missed a court date, had filled out all their paperwork. Someone who had permission to be here as a victim of violence under the Violence Against Women Act. And it goes on and on and on. To a person, to almost a case, with one exception. Every time the judges are saying, you have no right to detain these people. It sort of underscores what we're seeing on the streets.